Hello, my name is Alex Snyder, and I'm CEO and President of Sierra Madre Gold and Silver. Sierra Madre is a development company focused on the restart of the fully permitted past-producing La Guitarra silver and gold mine located about 200 kilometers from Mexico City. We are fully financed towards production.
Hi there. My name is Arturo Prestamon. I'm Chairman and CEO of Santa Cruz Silver. We are a silver-oriented company, and we have a production in Mexico and Bolivia, producing zinc and silver as well.
Guys, thanks very much for joining us today. We are going to talk silver today. And we're going to maybe kind of talk a little bit about the macro for people kind of new to the silver space, or perhaps a little bit notice about how it's performed in the past, and talk about a new bright future for it. So, Alex, on the macro side, what are you seeing out there, and what's it doing for you as a junior explorer?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, we've seen a nice little wrap up here from the start of the year. It was expected, and it's continued to perform very, very well. For us, anything above 25, all it's $25 an ounce is quite positive. And what we're seeing is this kind of demand build up, and it's mainly industrial that's really kind of growing the silver demand, but it's also store value for a lot of people. So continuing moving forward, we're going to see a massive deficit, at least in the silver market this year, close to 200 million ounces of silver, which is quite significant. It's projected to be the second largest demand for silver in recorded history, which is exciting, and it's going to continue to go moving forward.
It's exciting, especially if you're a producer and you're selling silver at the moment, because the silver price has done a lot of producers a lot of favors this year. Arturo, how's it worked for you?
Really, we're very positive. I completely agree with Alex's comments. I mean, this year, again, as a third year in a row, silver is going to be short on its supply, and near or close to 200 million ounces of silver on 2024. So I think that the more new technologies and environmental or renewable energies come to the market, the more demand for silver will keep coming.
Right, and when you sort of looking at, obviously, I'm sort of keen to understand how the different stages of companies are affected by silver price, because what we see in a lot of metals is it takes a long time to cascade down to the Explorco guys. Alex, I mean, is that what you were seeing, or does it allow you to have conversations with investors about what could be?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Matthew. So usually what happens is you'll see commodity run. The majors, let's say, they're going to be proxy to the price of silver, gold, whatever commodity you're talking about, and that happens. The next tier, kind of the mid-tier producers, the smaller companies, the ones with large resources that are getting into production relatively quickly, they kind of move second. And then when you get into the third tier, the exploration, that usually takes a little bit while longer. So what people want to see, investors, funds, things like that, are going to be kind of sustained quarters of operation. A lot of these companies in the next, financials are going to be making a lot of money, especially today's silver and gold prices. There's going to be a huge amount of cash flows generated. And what happens with that cash flow? Does it get returned to investors? Do some of these larger companies start acquiring some of the smaller or mid-tier or soon-to-be producing companies? Once that happens, that's when the real excitement starts. From there, then, of course, the cascading effect goes into the juniors and exploration, and you get paid for results. We're actually starting to see that right now. If you have good drill results, you're getting recognition in the market. And that wasn't happening, even 6 months ago, to say the least. So it takes time. It usually takes a couple quarters, a little bit of M&A. But when it starts to move, it does move pretty aggressively, which is exciting.
But I was going to stick with you, Alex. Okay, so on the Explorco side of things, I guess it's not necessarily new parts of the story, because you guys have always talked about solar and industrial usage, but it was hard to believe, right? It was hard to say, yeah, I get that, but it has been quarter after quarter, increased use of and build of solar, increased use of industrial. This isn't just a precious metal anymore. I can sort of see that it's going to help sustain the demand, whereas before silver has behaved very, very erratically. So again, does that help you?
Immensely. Like, best way to explain it. So solar panels is honestly the number one driver of silver. There's just no way around it. They're getting close to 25% of all silver produced this year is going to go to solar panels. And they're not slowing down. You fly over the US, you fly over lots of parts of the world, you see solar panels everywhere. So what does that mean for silver? Once silver goes into a solar panel, it's stuck there for a good 25 years. Like if I were to buy physical silver, may not be holding it for 25 years. Maybe it's a long time, but not quite that. So a huge amount of what's being produced is going into, solar panels right away. What at least I'm starting to see, and I'm sure Arturo is very similar, is the amount of demand and physical traders and groups like that are very, very keen on getting any sort of supply. So, we made an overture that we were hoping to be in, commercial production in, Q1 of 2025, so 6 months from now. And I've had dozens of groups reach out to try to acquire physical silver in any way they could, whether it's concentrated or, whatever type of product we'll be producing. So it just goes to show the amount of interest and demand that's out there for physical silver. And that's just a start. That's just a small part of it. And that, happens to take up 25% of all silver being used now.
No, I completely agree with Alex. The last few weeks, we were contacted by an ETF who wanted to buy silver directly from us. Of course, it's not the way we sell our silver, no, but it speaks about the interest that it's around silver and the momentum that it's definitely taking. And as Alex said at the beginning, silver this year is going to be, the supply for silver is going to be 17% lower than the last year. So I think this is going to the squeeze on the supply is going to definitely reflect on the price.
Okay, and Arturo, one question for you. What we're seeing in the gold market is that with producers, they're using this increased price and therefore increased margin, predominantly increased margin, to do a few things, as Alex has outlaid, and maybe that kind of cascades down. Also tries to kind of reshape the balance sheet somewhat. I know you're going through a sort of similar exercise because you've got 4 assets, 2 jurisdictions, a lot going on, and all this money gives you optionality. So how are you playing this market?
Well, definitely this increased cash flow that we're experiencing is allowing us to do exploration that was not in. Our objective or main premises to do over the last few years. So we're now expanding our mines. We're preparing our mines for another low cycle whenever it comes. We're making more developments. Just in January, we announced the conclusion of an interconnection ramp at Colquechaquita mine. That is going to increase the mine production and also will bring costs down at that mine. So we're definitely taking advantage of this and preparing our mines to be more efficient in the coming years.
Let's look at some of the other things that you're doing. For instance, like I get what you're doing on the supply side. Let's try and find more of this stuff. Let's try and produce more, take advantage of these prices. But what are the other things in terms of the corporate, like buying back NSRs or M&A activity? What are you looking at?
Absolutely. Well, in the corporate side of the business, we just restructure or refinance our debt with Glencore. This definitely allows us to have a stronger balance sheet and more flexibility. Part of our payments are now into a CVR payment, which is a conditional value right, where the trigger is once zinc reaches 3,850, which is a very comfortable price for us to keep building our treasury. So that is very important. We definitely have now the flexibility to keep growing and investing in the companies to keep growing organically and at M&A ideas or initiatives.
Right. Okay. And again, Arturo, sticking with you, what we're seeing in the gold, and Alex, I'm going to ask you the same question in a second. So, in the gold market, what we're seeing is big gold producers buying other equals, other gold producers. They're sticking with the known rather than the unknown. What do you think is going to happen in the silver space? Because there's a lot of silver explorers who
Right.
perhaps either expecting to get bought out or expecting to be rolled up or needing to attract cash in some way, shape, or form. It could be a long time coming.
Right. Well, I think that we're going to see more consolidation in the industry. This is the nature of our industry. So I think that with today's metal prices, more activity is going to be on the markets and definitely on the corporate. More M&A will be for sure by the end of or at least the third and fourth quarter of 2024. I think we'll see some activity there. and not to say on 2025. So it's going to be an interesting moment for our industry.
I would agree with that completely. It does take time, right? People need to see this increased revenues on the balance sheet. And as Arturo just said, companies like his, they're, finding ways to increase efficiencies to generate, larger cash flows down the road. So the big companies are the same. Silver was up there for a little while. When we were doing the due diligence through, for La Guitarra mine, silver dropped down to $18. And, it was, fortunately for us, the all sustaining costs should be much less than that. So we were happy, but I know some of the bigger companies, some of the bigger mining companies were stockpiling at that time because they foresaw what was happening in the price of silver. And, they're happy to sell now, but, I think below $20, they weren't selling. So it's going to take a little bit of time. The market needs to get comfortable with the new reality that this is going to be the base for silver before it could, eventually go higher. I expect it will. So a couple of quarters of strong revenues, companies fixing their balance sheet, revenues coming in, ounces being, increased through drilling and exploration. And that's when things start to get interesting. I think if I'm a mid-tier producer, I'm doing well. At that point, I would look to, add on companies and projects that are generating cash flow, that have a decent size reserve, and it can just, through efficiencies and acquire new companies, increase revenues and generate shareholder value, which is, the whole point of this.
Well, absolutely. And Alex, sticking with you, there's timing and patience always, right? So obviously, when you were looking at doing this deal with your own project, silver wasn't behaving like you'd want it to, but you still had a view forward looking as to what you thought silver price might do and how the market might behave, and you still went ahead with the deal. What are the learnings there for investors? That was from the company side of things, but for investors looking forward who were in the same situation, I remember the screaming and gnashing of teeth around that time. What would you advise?
So, I've always been out the, as an investor myself, I look for kind of the lowest cost quartile of companies and companies that can survive on lower pricing and things like that. So you have to be aware, but with increased silver price, it's going to open you up to a lot more options in terms of investability. Just make sure, as always, you're kind of invested in the top tier of corporates, ones that have, able to move through, whether it's increased production, through exploration, and you're going to be okay. And if you have a company with a track record of doing this before, that's where you kind of want to be invested. And let's say silver, for whatever reason, who knows, I'm not JP Morgan, I don't know what's happening with the price of silver, but if it ever falls off again, you have those companies that are building those cash positions now that can service their debt and can continue to explore and push their projects forward, because that's what it is. And it'll run. I don't know when, but it'll happen. And if it doesn't, you want to make sure you're protected on the downside always.
Right. Okay. And one thing you both have got in common, obviously, is the Mexico component. Obviously, you're in Bolivia as well, Arturo, but the Mexico there's a little bit more clarity now around it. It seems with, or at least some certainty around who's in charge of the country, and whatever you think she may or may not do, you'll be able to adjust your planning accordingly. So what was your take on the outcome of the election, Arturo?
Well, my opinion is that I'm positive on the little I know about Claudia Sheinbaum, our new president, is that she's very cautious and very, let's say, inclined into taking care of the foreign investment. So I think I think it's going to be a positive, and we'll be surprised with how she manages all the economic policies and the foreign investment. So I'm positive.
I hope Arturo's right. It's, I unfortunately think it might be a little more status quo of what's happened over the last administration. We will see. I know she has said, coming into the end of this year, that there could be some better reforms that will help, investment, international investment, things like that. But again, resources, they're so important to Mexico, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's mining. It's about 30% of the economy. So there's only so much you can play around with, to be honest. There's over 1,000 Canadian companies in Mexico, and they're either exploring or producing and things like that. So, continuality is important, and that's what we have right now. So that is positive. You're looking at some of the results and some of the polling beforehand, and it was kind of as expected, to be honest. She does have a fairly sized approval rating, which is, interesting, but it's what the people want. So I think we'll see some of the same processes that happened before and same ideas and values with a little bit more positive on the international investment side, which is great. So, it's one of the things when we acquired La Guitarra is we wanted a fully permitted mine. We had options of other projects that needed to go through the permitting process, some amazing projects that should be mines as it stands right now, but it was a little too much risk for us to take on. So we specifically went after fully permitted projects that, whatever might happen politically would still be, important and have the opportunity to produce and generate revenue.
Okay, so if you guys are getting approached by alternative alternative groups coming to you saying, we want your silver, we want the physical offtake of your silver, does that mean that there's potentially alternative types of funding? Because that's kind of what the sector needs down in this space. As we said earlier, there probably are some roll-ups or some companies just going bust, quite frankly. There's too many companies, is what I'm getting at, and in which case it'll make the investing world a lot easier if some of these companies actually don't make it through to the other side or get rolled up in one entity. Alex, again, how do you kind of read the market in terms of new money coming in and being able to kind of solve some of these problems?
Yeah, so a few things on that. Obviously, when we acquired the mine, the La Guitarra mine, we knew we were going to have a deficit of cash to put it back into full production. So we went out almost as a tender process. We were open to looking at raising equity, where perhaps royalty, offtake, debt, prepayment streams, everything like that. So we ended up having a number of groups, well over 10, interested in financing. And this was back in November, December. So even when the silver market hadn't even run. And we ran through that process. We looked at, equity. Obviously, the share price was lower then. Management still owns 25% of Sierra Madre, so it wasn't the exact route we wanted to go. Royalty, debt, offtake, all of them, it's all dilution, right? So it just makes sense to decide which is least dilutive for your shareholders and, best for the company. And we had numerous offers, which was really interesting, Matthew. Offtake guys were very, very aggressive. And we ended up doing a deal with our largest shareholder, First Majestic, who we acquired the mine from. So for us, the terms were very, very positive, 15% interest, a 2-year term. Lets us pay it back relatively easily, 6-month payment holiday as we push towards production, and off we go. So that was by far the most attractive, but the other ones weren't too far off, which is good. So it goes to show that there's money and capital out there for the right projects, especially with the right sector. So we noticed quite a bit.
Okay. And Arturo, what about yourself? Again, we've talked a little bit about money. How have you been looking at it? The cost of capital?
Yeah, for the time being, from our approach into our personal, our company financing, we're getting all debt out of the company for now. We're cleaning our balance sheet, and we want to keep going this way at least for the next 2 years before we start reviewing different alternatives. But definitely there's the royalty schemes are a bit high right now in our opinion, a bit expensive for our investors. In somehow it's not a direct dilution from a share structure, but there's a dilution there. So we want to be cautious in what approach we take in the future. But definitely I can see that more players are being more looking for projects to be financed. We had been approached by 3 streaming companies, very strong ones, with a good reputation. So I see more dynamics and taking place in the industry. But as Alex pointed out, we need to be cautious and take an approach that is the less dilutive to our investors. And for the time being, we're not looking into doing any of these, entering into any of these kind of facilities. No? But there's more and more alternatives out there.
Right. Okay. And so that kind of cost of capital can sometimes be quite painful initially, but the idea would be either refinance these things out later when money becomes a little bit more reasonable in terms of loans or liabilities or consideration payable, etc. Okay, that's fine. I guess this program is about trying to help investors understand what good looks like and what not so good looks like. And in the silver market, there's a lot of choice out there as well. So I think without naming names, just can you sort of describe some of the profiles of companies that perhaps don't have what it's going to take to survive? I mean, I'm going to talk to you on the exploration side, Alex. There's a lot of silver explorers in Mexico where you are. A lot of them saying the same thing as you. How do you stand out, and what's going to make them fall over?
I think it's with anything. So when I was a broker on the other side of Canaccord for a number of years, presentation would come in, broker would come in, and during that time, actually, we did the IPOs for Endeavor Silver, for Fortuna Silver, Great Panther, just to name a few. So got really comfortable with Mexico, really comfortable with silver and Peru as well. So first thing we would do is you go to the back and you look at the management team. What have they done in the past? What's their track record? How are they going to add shareholder value? How are you going to be able to invest? It's super high risk, high reward. Like you have no idea. You can minimize your downside risk by just hoping to invest in the right people. And that's what we were fortunate enough to do. So that's kind of my background. That's the way I look at things. So I always start with management if they've done it before. And then you want to look at obviously the property and also the share structure, making sure that they have the ability to raise capital even in a downturn market. You don't want to see your cap structure blown out because management had time to pour raise and didn't have enough capital push through the tough times. Having said that, then obviously you have to look at the property. So grade is always key. If you have high grade, you're going to be able to overcome multiple issues and multiple problems, which is great. It is mining. It's really tough. Such a small number of these companies actually get into production, which is incredible. So you can do a blanket approach where you invest in maybe 5 to 10 different companies that you really believe in. But I like to really dive into those companies, look at the management, look at the projects, look at the share structure. In fact, 2 or 3 that I really like, and that's how you want to play this and invest. You kind of want to go upstream. Some of the larger or mid-tier companies I like to look at, and then a higher risk again in terms of management, and then one in the middle that has the ability to move into that next tier. So that's the way I like to invest, and it's done pretty well because of it.
I'm going to say that I think that Alex described it perfectly, even in the same order. That it's I feel appropriate, well described, Alex. One thing that I will just add is just that make sure that the management or the company, the management that you're investing in, it's always aligned with investors. No, sometimes we see in this junior in this junior space that management is not really aligned with investors, and that's a significant problem, not for investors alone, but for the whole industry. Because, but I think that's also important to have in mind.
But for you, Arturo, do you think it would be? Well, obviously you kind of got the zinc lead component to the story as well. You've got the kind of de-risk, two jurisdictions that you operate in. But do you think this fact you've got, silver, zinc, lead, do you think that kind of helps in terms of the de-risking of it, or do you think it makes it a slightly more complicated story to understand?
No, I think honestly, Matthew, it's very straightforward. I mean, we produce 7.5 million ounces of pure silver. We produced around 45,000 tons of pure zinc and some lead and a little bit of copper. No, so it's just a very straightforward. If you want to use the zinc and lead to consider as the cost to produce the silver, there you are. But I think it's what I want to point out is that we produce a significant amount of silver that some companies, some of our peers are producing the same amount of silver that we produce as all their production, no? And definitely they are very well recognized, and I think that if you see the overall, you're very directly linked into the silver component by regardless of the amount of zinc that we produce. And my apologies, maybe I didn't respond properly the question, Martin.
No, I understand. And I guess just in terms of trying to understand the different types of business models which people are employing, because it's been a tough 3-4 years, quite frankly, Virginia space. Some would argue a lot longer than that. And I'm intrigued by the way that people interpret and play the market from the corporate side. And when you're in production and you're making money, life is good. Or if you've got multiple assets, people choose to come out in different ways. They can, farm out, farm in, JV. I have to want to frame it, but ways of offloading liability or ways of bringing in capital but retaining some of the equity upside. And you're sitting on multiple assets, multiple projects within both jurisdictions as well, with multiple commodities. It would seemingly be the easy option, just offload a couple and kind of focus on the rest. But you think that this will all kind of come good because the market general trend is up. Is that what you're saying?
Well, at least for us, we think so. I mean, zinc, I'm positive on zinc price for the next coming years. But definitely, we're comfortable with the 4 assets that we're running today in Bolivia, 3 of them, and in Mexico. All of them have a significant component of zinc. But we think that even though we have, let me put it this way, we want to be cautious in how we describe our production so that our investors can realize that we have a lot of zinc. And when we announce silver equivalency, they can realize that the equivalency is technically from a revenue point of view, it's coming from silver, but zinc is a significant component. So we want to be clear on that. And
Okay, cool. Alex, one final one for you before we kind of get into the roundup summary bit, which is around production. You're going for production soon. How do you time the market for that? In terms of, because again, that cost of capital, sometimes can make or break companies. Sometimes it's better to wait and time it. Sometimes it's better to kind of get on with it. Again, how are you viewing the timing?
Yeah, so when we acquired La Guitarra, we had always kind of guided Q1 2025. Give us enough time to make sure all our ducks were in a row. Again, you want to walk before you run. If you ever start production, you slow down. The market absolutely hates that, absolutely kills you. So we came out with a resource, and it was much bigger than expected. In essence, we tripled the historic resource. So it gave us a really big mine life, which is helpful, which is great. But then silver really started to move. And it was one of these things where, as a company, we were deciding if we wanted to go explore a little bit more, because it is a massive land package, one of the largest undeveloped silver districts in Mexico, or do we push towards production? Well, the price of silver really accelerated that. So we got into the market, we raised that capital. I wouldn't have raised debt if I wasn't able to pay it off through production. So we kind of pivoted a little bit and just focused on production. Because remember when I said earlier, when silver was at $18, we were happy. But at $28, $30 an ounce, we're absolutely ecstatic. So we've done everything we can to push towards production at a reasonable speed, making sure we're not missing anything, all our ducks in a row. And that's what we're doing. So we will be producing very soon. We'll see those revenues start to generate, and then we can go explore the rest of the project area at a cash flow. So it's extraordinarily exciting times.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm going to get each of you to kind of basically 2 minutes elevator pitch to the investors watching this. Why should we be investing in your projects? Arturo, why don't you kind of kick it off? 2 minutes.
Well, we have just cleaned up our balance sheet. We have accomplished this very important restructuring with Glencore. Our assets are very strong. Life of mine, it's around 5-7 years, and we'll be definitely producing similar quantities as last year, around 22-23 million ounces silver equivalent for the year. We have achieved the most important capex investments at Bolivia, so that will bring costs down in the next coming quarters. So I think we're well positioned to be a strong company in this space, and we got rid as well of the NSRs. So technically, we have no other commitments financially other than the Glencore payments, which has been split into in a very appropriate way for us to be serving it comfortably. So I think that the market will realize when they see a few good quarters and good numbers on the company, and I think we're well positioned to take advantage of the metal prices that we expect in these coming years?
Yeah, just to touch on what Arturo just said there. Again, we're expecting to hopefully capitalize on the increase in silver price over the next few months here as we push towards production. But to go back, as I told everybody, it's usually about the managing team. So fortunately enough, I've been part of a successful M&A over the last little while. I was part of Millennial Lithium, the team there. We sold our project in Argentina for just under $500 million. I'm also president of a company called Lift Power, who would raise over $70 million in the last 2 years to explore a large pegmatite project in the Northwest Territories. And then finally, my chief operating officer, Greg Liller. Greg has spent the majority of his career in Mexico. He's had 7 projects, early stage, that have become mines, which is truly unheard of, including the La Guitarra mine. So he's had successful M&A of over $1 billion, the right know-how and the right people to push these projects forward. So if you're looking for your investment, you want to look at management, and then take a look at Sierra Madre.